Hey everyone, Aaron Lovejoy here for Nights at the Game Table. And in a previous episode, we did some true metallic metal silver. And some of you have asked, how would I make this rusty? So if you're doing like a chaos night or someone who's like been out there in battle for a long time, you're going to want to put some like rust effects on his armor, but you're not going to want to put too much because it will look kind of weird. The first thing you're going to want to do is pull up some reference material and see what rust actually looks like. You'll find that older rust is darker and newer rust is brighter, more orange. So to that effect, we're going to grab a bunch of brown shades for our rust colors. I've got Citadel's Rhinox Hide, which is a reddish rust, which is a great dark rust color. I've got a little black on my palette too, so that I can make colors a little bit darker and desaturated. I've also got Secret Weapon Miniatures Old Rust, which is a purpley rust color. I've got Mournfang Brown, which is an orangey brown color, and I've also got Secret Weapon Miniatures Yellow Rust, which is an orangey yellow. So those will be the colors we're going to be using, and we can kind of put them on in any order we want. But I usually start with my Mournfang Brown just to kind of get an idea of some rusty areas. Let me put on my reading glasses so that I can see properly. Again, these are dollar store reading glasses, so I can lose them every day if I want to. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my a small detail brush, in this case Artis Opus 00 brush, and I'm just going to take a little bit of that Mournfang Brown, and I'm going to put it into some areas that I want my rust to happen. So a lot of times, where does rust usually accumulate? And that's areas that hold water. So any area like between, armor plates and stuff, there would probably be more, it would be more apt to get rusty. But as you've seen in real life, sometimes rust can happen out in the middle of an area. Just, maybe there was some damage or something, some battle damage, and the rust is starting to happen right there on the metal. So I'm going to start off with doing a couple of little, some of the edges. So I'm just going to put a little bit of this Mournfang Brown down at the bottom of this crack on the armor, and I've just put a big blob there. I'll lick off my brush so it's a little bit damp, and then I take the edge of the brush and I grab that paint and I pull it back across the armor plate. What that does is starts giving me some brown areas to start my rust in. I can also take the front of that armor plate and pull it right under. So I've got a little bit of rust there. I'm also going to put some in other areas, like maybe we'll do it a little bit lower on this armor, and I'll just put a blob of rust right there. Again, taking my blending brush, just kind of grab the outside edge of that, and I'm just going to kind of fade out the outside edge so it's not just a straight line of paint. You can fiddle with it a bunch or just a little bit. If you think that there's too much rust, you can wipe most of it away, and then you just have this very subtle rust effect. Let me add a little bit up here towards the top of this armor plate. I'm just going to put a little blob of paint, and again take my blending brush and just kind of wipe away the outside edge, pull it along the top edge of this. So I've just got a little bit of rust at the top edge of that armor plate. Another place that rust likes to start growing is in the rivets. So if I put a blob of paint right by this rivet, take my blending brush, wipe it around the outside edge of that plate. Boom, very quick. I'll do it on this one as well. So this is a great way to define parts of the model that maybe weren't that well defined before. Like maybe we didn't get a shadow in there like we should have. And putting this little bit of rust will give us, you'll be able to see that rivet a little bit better. All right, let's find some other areas that we can put some rust. Maybe like the top plate right there. Again, we're putting the paint on in a bigger area than we want. And then I'm gonna kind of just feather it out and down the cracks. So it's stronger in this top area and then just kind of goes down the crack. Let's do it On this rivet back here. And we're just gonna kind of move that around. And we'll do it on the last rivet too, what the heck. Rivets always look good with rust around them. But we're not putting too much, we're just putting a little bit. This touch of color. The color shows up better because it's a very orangish brown, and a very saturated color will show up more next to a desaturated color, and since our silver is pretty much desaturated, in fact, I consider silver just a gray when I'm picking out colors. This orangish brown is so saturated that it's gonna show up really well against that desaturated color. So we're letting our colors work for us. In this case, put a little bit down here on the chest plate and move it up around that area of detail right there. So we got all that. I'm gonna put a little bit on this side too, just to kind of even things out. Maybe have a little bit up here against that collar part of the armor. And you literally just pull the paint around the different details. I think this bottom edge of armor, we removed most of the rust. I'm gonna put it back in a couple spots. Leave it fairly strong and saturated. So now we got some cool areas of rusty color. Now we can start manipulating and messing with it. I'm gonna grab a little bit of this Secret Weapon Miniatures orange rust or yellow rust. Mix it around in my brush. See, sometimes I spin my brush on my palette like that to get the tip a little bit better. And I'm just gonna add some pockets of newer rust. So maybe up in the shoulder pad, I'll put a blob in there. Maybe I'll put a bigger blob so that it shows up a little bit better. And I'm just gonna pull from the outer edges of that blob and pull that orange rust around the edge of the armor. So again, this will simulate our newer rust, and it also just gives us some tonal differences in the paint job. I'm gonna put some right up here. Again, taking my blending brush and just kind of blending it out. I can also put little bitty dots of paint. Kind of almost stipple it in, because this rust would be really blotchy, especially this color. It's brand new, so it kind of just crops up and grows where it wants to grow. All right, I'm gonna take some area up in here where we put the rust up on that part of the shoulder pad, and kind of in the outer edges of that rust area, I'm gonna kind of just stipple in a little bit of this yellowy rust. And I'll do it 2 or 3 times. I'm not trying to put the stipple right on top of the last one. I'm just kind of randomly putting it on, and whatever happens, happens. Get that. Put a little bit more on some of these areas around the shoulder pads. Again, this just kind of gives us some different tones within the tones. Makes the rust a little bit more interesting. Sometimes putting these colors, the lighter colors in your darkest areas on the paint job, can help make the details really pop. It gives us a reason to have a lighter color in a darker area. Because it's rust, it's just different. Those little bits all over the place. We can even start adding some small streaks. Maybe I want a streak over here. Like the rust has run down the armor. So I'm gonna put a little blob of paint. I'm gonna work my brush halfway into that blob and pull it down. So that makes a perfect little streak of rust. And I can do that in several different places. Like I could do it over here. doesn't work, wipe it off. Try it again. This gives you really realistic little lines of paint that would be very hard to do if you were just layering them. In this case, it just looks like a natural streak of paint. So got that. Maybe a little bit more up here, again in sort of a stippling fashion. It's kind of haphazard. You don't want it to be too ordered. You don't want it to be every couple, like have it 1, 2, 3, 4. You just want to have like one here, one there, whatever. Not too ordered in the painting. Now we're gonna start adding some deeper shadows. I've got this old rust from Secret Weapon Miniatures, and it's a very purpley rust, which is kind of nice. And we're just gonna start adding it into areas where we want to make it darker. So again, just kind of adding spots, like maybe at the bottom of that armor there. We want it to be dark anyway, so we just add the darker color. But it's a rusty color, so it looks cool. Maybe in the outside edge of that. And this just kind of gives us some tonal variations that look pleasing to the eye on the model. And then we'll grab a little bit of our Rhinox hide as well, which will be our darkest rust color. And we'll put that in the deepest areas where we want either the oldest rust or we want the deepest shadows. So we're kind of just faking it at this point. So if you're patient, you can keep all these lines blended in little or no time at all. Let's do the outside edges of this armor. Technically, this is just reinforcing the shadows, but it's also giving us a brown tint to the armor that goes along with all the rust that we have going. And then maybe I'm gonna put a really big streak, just for the fun of it, of our Mournfang brown, and I'm gonna add that right up here at the top of the armor. Like, there's just a big streak of rust going down the front of his chest. Maybe he left his armor out overnight or something. So I'm trying to wipe away this edge and leave the other edge a solid line. Just get a little bit of that rust, and maybe I'll put one more streak right here, because that will look kind of cool. You'll see that really well going down the front of the armor. Switch, you can always mix colors like Mournfang brown and this yellow rust to give us more of an orangey rust color. And I'm gonna add that to a couple of these rivets. Again, it's kind of a highlight, it's kind of rust. No one really knows for sure. Maybe I'll put a little rust in some of these cracks, like they're really old. And right here. You can even use a little bit of your highlight color on the edges of panels. Not everywhere, but in certain spots, because these panels the rust would get rubbed off and then it'd immediately start growing again. So sometimes you can actually use it as a highlight color around the outside edge of the model. I think there'd be a bunch of rust up in here because maybe that would catch water, or water could pool up there. We'll put some up on top here too. So you see, just by adding different colors of warm brown, you can achieve some really cool rust effects very quickly. A little bit more right underneath this plate right here. And the other important thing to remember with rust is know when to stop. So I think I'm going to stop right about here because I don't want to put too much rust on here. I still want it to look like metal plates, but I don't want it to look like he's been left outside for 16 years and he's just completely rusted. So go ahead and try these techniques out at home. If you have any questions, feel free to ask. And until next time, I'm Aaron Lovejoy. Thanks for watching.